During the climax of the Baki Hanma vs Kengan film, we had Yujiro invade the end of the battle between Baki and Tokita Oma, wanting to fight the user of the Nico style, the man who inherited his techniques, of course talking about Oma's master, Tokita Nico. Then, the almighty beard Kuroki Gensai arrived, looking like a thick boy. Yujiro reveals that he's also aware of him, particularly his Devil Lance, with Kakukayo claiming that these two have reached the final evolution of strength. They prepare to fight, with Kuroki wanting to test his skills and the ogre always being about throwing hands. However, the issue is they cut right into the middle of the Baki and Oma fight, who are now pissed and try to attack both monsters with no success at all. Kuroki even says to Baki that he could never land a punch on him. Is this the truth? I'll get into that later on, but before anything else could happen, Tokigawa and Matsudo stopped the fight, revealing that they planned on setting up a Yujiro vs Kuroki match in the future, but now is not the time. Something that actually connects to the crossover manga chapter released a few years prior. The film confirmed that this chapter is pretty much canon, referencing the Doppo Orochi vs the father of Sorpang fight we got in the chapter. Additionally, during those pages we got to see a young Kuroki Gensai being discussed as a wanted fighter for Tokigawa and Matsudo, with a direct comparison to a young Yujiro Hanma, who around this time is beginning to be recognized as the strongest creature, with the two old men saying Kuroki is just like him. Therefore, you can see that the narrative being provided for the Kengan vs Baki crossover stuff is that Kuroki is on Yujiro's level, implying that they would have a very close fight. So today I'll be breaking down the truth about this matchup, explaining how strong each fighter is and whether it really should be considered close and does make sense at all. Let's begin with Kuroki Gensai, the Devil Lance. Naturally, there will be spoilers for the Kengan Ashura story and even Kengan Omega throughout, you have been warned. Kuroki was introduced as a 50-year-old assassin from the underworld who stands at 185 centimeters tall and weighs 96 kilograms. He is the current master of the K1 style, who has not faced defeat in the Kengan story thus far. Right as he was introduced to the manga, we see him poke holes in this steel ship with his fingers alone, I guess for a laugh, walking around saying he has no blind spots with this Giga Chad panel. Before even round 1 of the Annihilation tournament, we have Ray who claims that Kuroki is the most dangerous opponent in this entire block, something that also includes Kanoh Gito on that side, the one viewed by pretty much everyone else as the strongest and one to beat. With us learning shortly why Ray said this, naturally when talking about Kuroki, we need to discuss his martial art. The K1 style involves its own katas, various research, and something that gets enhanced when someone has more knowledge and experience, which Kuroki is pretty much the representation of in the Kengan story. Alongside all of this, its most important aspect is the hand conditioning, which results in Kuroki's main technique, the Devil Lance, which is pretty much durability negating on anyone in the Kengan story. It can pretty much pierce any opponent, as I'll get into detail shortly. Additionally, this martial art was one of the key ones that resulted in the creation of the Nico style. This is because Kuroki Gensai's master worked with Gai Mikaku to create what pretty much Oma is now using in the story. So now with all this in mind, in the first fight we got to see him have, he faced Rito, who he absolutely dominated, but this didn't really highlight Kuroki as the strongest right away, as Rito could be argued as the weakest fighter in the tournament, so it's not really that important. Then in round 2 he faced Kiryu Setsuna, defeating him. Some aspects of this victory come down to Kuroki's knowledge of Kiryu's fighting style, being friends with Kiryu's master, alongside being aware of a lot of stuff when it comes to the Nico style. However, at a narrative level, Kiryu had a lot of stuff going for him, pretty much being the main antagonist for Oma at that point, so Kuroki defeating him in round 2 in the way he did with pretty much domination again was pretty impressive, with a lot of the fighters starting to realize that Kuroki could potentially be on the Fangs level, with this fight proving once again the power of the Devil Lance. how even when breaking part of his hand like a finger, he can still use it, and we get to see this throughout the continued fights. He proceeds to fight Rei, the one who was aware of Kuroki's strength from the very start. This is because Kuroki was the one who actually killed his father. Generational beef, you could say. Kuroki in this fight had a little bit of prep time, seeing how fast Rei was in the prior round against Saw Pang and pretty much analysing it. However, for his surprise, Rei amped his speed even more through this type of power from his employer, allowing him to land the initial attack on Kuroki, a major blow you could say. But apart from that, Kuroki was able to dominate for the remainder of the fight. Even if his fingers were destroyed, the Devil Lance remains, with Kuroki's defense being a key aspect that pretty much makes him unstoppable. His opponents can't really land proper blows on him and can't get through his defense, even if they're so fast that no fighters could actually see Rei. This actually has some calculations which I'll go over later in the video. Kuroki, with the power of foresight, a key ability in the Kengan universe that allows top tiers like Kuroki to be virtually unstoppable compared to the lower tiers, involving pretty much predicting your opponent's move via subtle motions they make, having various versions of it that Kuroki can use, and then the ultimate, I guess, final form, pre-initiative, which Kuroki is also a master at using. When we initially learn about this, we also got a flashback with Kuroki performing this feat. Once again, something that has calculations that I'll go over that does make Kuroki's speed very impressive. But the key thing to remember is this is the overpowered nature of foresight, and pretty much allowed Kuroki to dominate Rei and win without much difficulty when looking at the entire fight. Now in round 4 of the Annihilation tournament, we have Kuroki fight another certified top tier, the one I would regard as the second strongest in the entire tournament, Kanoh, the Fang of Metsudo, who pretty much everyone else still participating in the tournament wants to fight. You could say Oma wants revenge after being clowned on in the earlier rounds, viewing him as pretty much the main antagonist now. Wakatsuki, who's fighting Oma in round 4, has literally spent the last 7 years getting stronger to get revenge against Kanoh after being defeated in the past. And then even Kuroki Gensai, we learn his whole purpose for entering this tournament was to defeat Kanoh, being requested by Metsudo himself, pretty much freeing Kanoh from the shackle of being the Fang for so long, becoming this undefeatable fighting machine. Kuroki came in and humbled him. Yes, the fight was insanely close. We had various points throughout where Kuroki was on the losing end, and then likewise for Kanoh going back and forth. Probably regarded as the greatest fight in all of Kengan, even to this day considering Omega, and it's definitely going to be hard to top considering how peak it truly was. We got to see again Kuroki's defense being absolutely monstrous, Kanoh comparing it to a boulder, which is similar to what Baki compared Yujiro to back in their fight, which is pretty cool. We got to see for the first time what it looks like when two pre-initiative users face one another, conveying how much thinking ahead can help one gain victory in a fight, demonstrating how much of a master Kuroki truly is. Even with his arm pretty much being destroyed and his hand as well, he's able to continue using his Devil Lance with his thumb alone, and then pretty much bring his arm back to continue fighting, landing monstrous blows to end the legacy of Kanoh in the Kengan Ashura story, like an absolute mad lad. During the end of the fight, when he claimed victory, he regarded Kanoh as an equal to himself. However, based on the injury sustained, the fact that Kuroki won, Kuroki is regarded as a little bit stronger, and even Q&A answers from the author pretty much imply this as well. Therefore, this was the moment in the Kengan story where everyone reading pretty much viewed Kuroki as the strongest. You could say the Yujiro of the Kengan story was born at that stage. Which now brings us to one of the coolest flashbacks we got in Kengan, which was for Kuroki during this fight. We learned that he performed this ritual, which is pretty much standing in fire for 3 days and 3 nights, with these monks considering him the avatar of the Wisdom King, alongside claiming that he has become too strong, so strong that he has no one left to fight him but out himself, praying that he could find someone to quench that solitude, which he gets in Kengan Omega, I guess, which I'll get into shortly. But before all of that, we have the final fight of Kengan Ashura, Kuroki Gensai versus the protagonist Tokita Oma. This required Oma to pull out all of his moves, various Nika style techniques in combination, the return of the advance that he hadn't used for a few rounds, everything he could for the hope of landing some attacks and breaking through Kuroki's defense, which he did a few times but nothing major, forcing Oma to try something new, something far beyond ever before, combining both of his ultimate techniques, the advance and his Demon's Bane, to counter Kuroki's Devil Lance and send all of that power back on Kuroki, which results in potentially the biggest meme of the Kengan story, but even that couldn't reach Kuroki. He tanked it with his arm once again, you know, the one that took the damage from Kiryu, the one that Kanoh pretty much got destroyed in the middle of the fight. It was here once again, just destroying everyone. Kuroki was the winner of the Annihilation tournament, defeating Kanoh Gito, who I would regard as the second strongest in Ashura, defeating Oma, who I would regard as the third strongest, defeating Rei, who's also in top 10, defeating Kiryu, who has arguments for being in top 10 as well. Kuroki Gensai definitely has an impressive resume from the Kengan Ashura story. And now, guess what he said at the end of that manga? That he's still green, continuing to grow in power in the sequel series Kengan Omega, which initially takes place 2 years after the end of Kengan Ashura, with Kuroki spending that time training Ryito, who's now growing to an insane degree currently in the Kengan Omega story. So I guess Kuroki is also a good master. He unfortunately didn't participate in the first tournament, Kengan vs Purgatory. However, he was watching the fight, making claims about Kanoh Gito's improvements along the lines that he doesn't know whether he can defeat Kanoh Gito, and showing respect for other fighters like Jirota. But all of this could be argued as Kuroki pretty much being humble. We learn, thanks to the introduction of Lolong, that these two actually have paths together, clashing due to being on opposing sides. Kuroki hired as an assassin and Lolong hired as a bodyguard. The fight was pretty much a draw, inconclusive, but if you look at what's being said and shown in the panels, it seems like Kuroki was at an advantage and kinda sunning him to a degree. This in combination with what happened between Lolong and Oma, having Oma claim victory in a very clean way. Yes, various points were quite close and Lolong pretty much won the pre-initiative battle. Some people consider this an actual low diff, but regardless of all that, it's definitely a high diff if you look at the entire fight and consider how much Lolong limited Oma in that fight, and how with one wrong move, Lolong could have actually been the victor, alongside Lolong's character profile provided by the author, confirming that he's on par with Oma and Ryan at that time, pretty much equals, with this line from Oma pretty much putting Kuroki on a pedestal to me, alongside pretty much all the other top tiers doing a similar thing. For example, during Kanoh and Jirota's fight after this, we have Kanoh still thinking about Kuroki, him being the one Kanoh wants to defeat and get stronger to face in the future. That's his goal, likewise for some other fighters. So Kuroki is still a step above these guys, and we get this highlighted in pretty much Kuroki's biggest clash we've had since the Annihilation tournament, when he was hired to pull up on Shen Wulong, by far the strongest character we've ever seen in the Kengan story. Something power wise that's pretty much from a different universe compared to what we saw in Kengan Ashura. I have a whole big video going over everything there is to know about Shen Wulong and how he compares to Yujiro. I would say he's the ogre of the Kengan story, that's how he's being written, and potentially having even more crazy narrative form, which is pretty wild. Highly recommend checking out that video to get a full understanding of Kuroki Gensai and how impressive this scene was when he faced Shen Wulong for that brief moment I'm about to go over. So the almighty beard pulls up with this amazing panel and insane aura saying, "I challenge you." The connector tries goofing around, but then Kuroki attacks with his Devil Lance, forcing Shen Wulong to block and straight away say, "You're stronger than anyone else I've met in this country." That includes Oma and any any other top tier Shen Wulong has met since being introduced to the story, with this being highlighted as Kuroki is able to damage Shen Wulong, while Shen Wulong isn't purposely nerfing himself like he did against Guy Mukaku, with us seeing the beard tank various attacks from Shen Wulong and land his own very simple counters, not relying on foresight or pre-initiative, just regular counters in a very calm manner, taking out a monster far beyond anyone else, forcing the connector to give him respect, saying nice reaction, but unfortunately the fight was then cut off due to Kuroki's employers being overthrown. But a key aspect about this fight is that neither of them were serious. Shen Wulong was not using any techniques, messing around by using one side of his body to fight, still absolutely insane. Also claiming that Kuroki himself wasn't going serious. So if they do fight again, hopefully it's both of them going serious, then we'll definitely get to see what truly happens. With Shen at a later point in the Kengan Omega manga, claiming that his overall goal is to face someone just as strong as him, have that, long battle to the death, potentially what Kuroki wants as we learned back in Kengan Ashura, with him saying the closest thing he's seen to what he wants is Kuroki himself, putting the beard as the second strongest in the Kengan universe currently just by default with that line. Which now brings us to the most recent chapters of Kengan Omega. Kuroki is currently training Tokita Oma for the purpose of fighting Shen Wulong in the mountains together, with Shen Wulong arriving himself about to have a conversation with Oma and Kuroki, so can't wait for that. That's why I recommend catching up to the Kengan Omega manga, another series I talk about regularly on the channel here. Also subscribe. Now it's time to go over some calculations, the main feats that Kuroki scales above to get a range of how strong he is in a cross-verse setting. So for strength, we know he scales above most of the other fighters due to defeating Oma and Kanoh in the way he did, with Oma having some of the best feats to really gauge characters in a cross-verse setting. For example, when he was learning the Nico style ultimate technique Demon's Bane with his master Tokita Nico, Oma performed this feat in the forest with his Demon's Bane the first time he used it. Demon's Bane involves the power of the user and the attack it's deflecting back in combination, so the feat is actually performed by the combined power of the very injured, almost dead Oma and Tokita Nico, which has these various calculations from some sources. We have low end, high ends, which go pretty wild in the range you can see. I would say the similar thing Kuroki was able to overcome in the Annihilation tournament was more impressive. This is for the following reasons. 1. Oma is older and stronger than what he was in the flashback. 2. He was using his advance in combination with the Demon's Bane to, I guess, increase the output as well, alongside also deflecting Kuroki's Devil Lance, an attack that may be stronger than the blow Oma's master used in the flashback scene. Regardless, I would say the two moments are very comparable with what happened and the amount of power used. Kuroki was able to outright tank the blow, similar to what Oma's master did, potentially in a more direct way, which adds more to Kuroki's durability, which of course will scale to his strength. But regardless of raw strength output, his Devil Lance is durability negating, so he should be able to pierce anyone, including Yujiro Hanma, considering these calculations for power provided in the Kengan universe. Now when it comes to speed, we have various things that could have Kuroki around the hypersonic range, but considering his abilities such as foresight and pre-initiative, he's able to deal with characters and fighting situations which are faster than that, which is going to be very helpful in his clash against Yujiro Hanma, making that the main things you need to know about Kuroki and how strong he is. Now let's compare that to the ogre Yujiro Hanma. At a narrative level within his own story, he was introduced as the strongest, and even now, over 1,000 chapters later, he is still indeed the strongest, viewed as such by 99% of the fandom, and even the characters within the Bakiverse consider him the strongest creature still. Therefore, when it comes to feats and any calculations for Baki characters, Yujiro can be assumed as above all of it. Looking at his strength, him stopping an earthquake and all the other related showings is the most simple way to scale him. Like Kengan, it has a wide range of calculations, with the highest end being above the Kengan universe, but when you take the average or the most fair interpretation, you could say they're quite close. However, on that note, when Yujiro performed that feat, that was very early in the series, while in base form, and honestly quite casual as well. We also see the ogre getting progressively stronger throughout the story, making current Yujiro Hanma the strongest he's ever been. Additionally, there's an even higher way to scale Yujiro, using the meteor that killed the dinosaurs with the argumentation that Yujiro is above Pickle, making his calculations go pretty wild, especially when it comes to strength and durability, with there being a few other ways to get him to a higher degree than anything in Kengan. So with all that said, it's likely the case that Yujiro is physically stronger than Kuroki. Now, speed in Baki is very controversial. Looking at some calculations, you see the same hypersonic range, some hypersonic plus, etc. But there are a few moments that people like to use for speed scaling way above that. However, many of them have clear ways to disprove what's being said, mainly when looking at the context of what's happening. This one is just from Pickle's perspective at that time. This one had a whole chapter right after that explaining the meaning of stuff like this, how people name techniques something not really related to the technique itself. So you could call it a light speed jab. It doesn't mean it's actually a light speed jab. We have a similar thing in Kengan for the character Carlos. This one I like to use quite often in my videos, which is during the fight between Yujiro and Masashi, a very recent Yujiro compared to the earlier stuff mentioned. Does also have issues depending on what translation of Baki you're using, how many zeros there are, whether or not you consider these X's zeros as well. So once again, a wide range of calculations, but at the highest end, it is above anything in Kengan. As mentioned before, Yujiro has a stronger narrative in his own series, as the absolute strongest, the creature even above nukes as claimed many times, which is quite funny. The one even above time and pretty much everything else at this point. You could say Yujiro has an aura unlike anyone else, having some techniques like the whip strike, durability negating, Xiao Li for the fence, and many more considering this statement early in the series. Apart from that, as we got to see in the Baki vs Oma fight, Baki can indeed copy techniques, something we saw in the early days of Baki as well. Yujiro should be able to do this. We have technically seen him use it with Xiao Li potentially, and can probably copy techniques to a better and higher degree than Baki. I forgot to mention this, but the Baki verse technically has an ability similar to pre-initiative. It could even be argued as a more advanced version considering interpretation of these moments, so Yujiro does have access to pre-initiative, I guess, to a degree. But with all of this said, Kuroki knows how to deal with people stronger than him physically, so the question is, who would really win between these two? Before that, I have a 10% discount code for gamer subs for all you mad lads to use, link in the description. I like using the caffeine free version when working on videos like this, and the ones with caffeine for the gym grind of course, potentially some videos regarding that coming soon. With many more cool things you legends would absolutely enjoy. Check out the link, it supports me and allows me to make big videos like this. So everything considered, I would still place my bets on Yujiro Hanma being the victor in this clash. Whether you use current Yujiro versus current Kuroki, I would go for the ogre. Whether you use the Kengan Ashura version of Kuroki and then the Yujiro from his fight with Baki, I would still pick Yujiro. I would say it's a lot closer than many of you realize, so I recommend checking out the Kuroki portion of this video and understanding the might of the almighty beard, which unfortunately I don't believe reaches the ogre, but I do think it's a cool matchup. Stay tuned for more content like this. Shout out to the members, these absolute mad lads. That's it guys, peace.